Welcome back to Movies Explained. Today's film is a 2020 psychological horror titled You Should Have Left. The movie begins with a spooky shadow moving toward the staircase. Ella hears a strange sound coming from the dressing room and gets up to investigate. After getting no response, she assumes it must have been the open door making the noise, so she closes it and rushes back to bed. As she turns around, she is horrified to see a hideous-looking man sitting beside her bed. The man grabs Ella by the neck and lifts her. Suddenly, Theo Conroy wakes up from a nightmare, drenched in sweat. Unable to sleep, he decides to check on his daughter to make sure she's okay. Upon entering her room, he finds Ella peacefully sleeping in her bed. Relieved, Theo takes some pills to deal with his stress, revealing that he has been plagued by frequent nightmares. The next day, Theo's wife, Susanna, heads to work. The couple appears happy despite the obvious age difference between them. They live together closely as a family in a large house. Later, Theo tries to visit his wife on set, but the production assistant won't let him in. Despite mentioning that Theo is her husband, the assistant claims it's a closed set and that his name is not on the call sheet. Susanna is an actress, and Theo feels a pang of jealousy toward her and her colleagues. Adding to his insecurity, many people mistake Theo for Susanna's father rather than her husband. So eventually, Theo stays back and waits for Susanna. Later, Susanna says goodbye to her colleagues and meets Theo. She tells her husband all about the day's filming. She claims it was an exciting experience for her. However, Theo is displeased upon realizing that Susanna is filming a sex scene. But Susanna isn't ready to give up her career for his wishes. Later, Theo suggests a family trip to get away from it all. Susanna has 2 weeks before her next filming in London, so she agrees. The family sets off on their journey to a place far from the city. While their drive is peaceful, at one point, Susanna gets distracted and they almost get into an accident. Eventually, they arrive at the luxurious mansion they have rented in the countryside. Ella and Susanna are thrilled about their trip, but the only downside is the lack of signal, which doesn't bother Theo since he wants a peaceful trip with no interruptions from anyone, let alone Susanna's colleagues. Later, while Theo and 6-year-old Ella are spending time together, Ella asks what happens to people when they go to heaven. Although Theo does not believe in paradise, he reassures his daughter that their family will always be together. Before bedtime, Ella plays with her shadow, but gets startled by a large shadow at one point. Theo enters the room to put Ella to bed when she tells him about someone being inside her room. However, Theo dismisses Ella's story and wishes her good night before leaving. Scared, Ella hides under the covers. Before the scene shifts, the big black shape appears again. Meanwhile, the thermostat unexpectedly breaks, meaning that the house will be chilly at night. Susanna promises to talk to the homeowner tomorrow. Next, the couple discusses the past, unaware their daughter is listening. When they see Ella, she quickly runs to her room. Theo checks on Ella and turns off the room lights. So, while Susanna waits for him in their bedroom to watch a TV show together, a door suddenly opens by itself, startling Theo. He then notices a spooky photo on the wall, but doesn't think much about it. After Theo leaves, the lights come back on. When he enters the bedroom, Susanna is already asleep. Theo is surprised because he didn't realize he had been gone for hours. That night, Theo has more nightmares. The next morning, he finds a note from his wife saying they've gone for a walk, as advised by her therapist. Theo writes in his diary to help deal with his feelings. Meanwhile, Ella climbs a tree and her mother tells her to come down, but she doesn't listen. At one point, Ella asks why some people dislike her father so much, while Susanna keeps urging Ella to come down. Suddenly, Ella falls, but her mother catches her. Later, Susanna explains to Ella that Theo's ex-wife, Caroline, passed away accidentally in a bathtub after taking too much medication. A lot of people blame Theo for what happened because he was a rich banker, and his rivals wanted the case to go to court. However, the judge and jury found Theo innocent. Naturally, Theo's competitors are unhappy with the result, and it becomes a hot topic on TV. Struggling with anxiety, Theo goes to a local store where a strange cashier asks if anything odd has happened in the house he's staying in yet, and mentions someone named Stettler. Confused, Theo doesn't understand. Before leaving, the cashier gives him a ruler and suggests measuring angles in his house. Near his car, Theo meets a woman who asks him how he found the house. Sarcastically, Theo says he hasn't seen Stettler, and the woman responds in a creepy tone. "But he saw you." Feeling like everyone is acting strangely, Theo returns home and realizes his daughter knows about Caroline. He is upset that Susanna told Ella without discussing it with him. They had planned to talk about this when Ella turned 7, but Susanna insists they can't wait any longer. During dinner, everyone stays quiet. Suddenly, Ella places her hand on her father's hand, and Theo thanks her for supporting him. Later, while Susanna is taking a bath, Theo peeks at her phone, knowing the password. He reads the messages easily, but finds nothing suspicious. He then checks her tablet and laptop, but doesn't find anything concerning. Theo realizes he can trust his wife, and that he's just being paranoid. Feeling a little guilty for the argument they had earlier, Theo tells her it was the right decision to tell Ella the truth. During the night, he wakes up from a nightmare, and even when awake, he's still troubled by scary memories from the past. When he opens his diary, Theo finds a note urging him to leave immediately. Just then, he hears strange noises, and when Theo looks around, his reflection doesn't move. This happens twice until he hears the sounds again and sees a third door that hadn't been there before. Theo goes downstairs into a dark corridor and suddenly sees a woman's shadow appear and disappear behind him. He asks if anyone is there. At that moment, someone takes a photo of him with a flash. After that, he finds many pictures of himself and his family scattered on the floor. Theo is shocked and unable to believe that all of this is really happening. He then sees his daughter's toy and Ella herself lying unconscious on the floor. Terrified, Theo quickly picks her up and takes her out of the room. He realizes that the same thing happened to her as it did to Caroline. Panicking, Theo starts hitting his face and hurting himself, hoping it's a nightmare and he'll wake up soon. Indeed, after a few seconds, he actually wakes up in his bed. Theo tells Susanna about the strange door he saw in his dream and shows her the photograph of that corridor. Susanna reassures him that he hasn't gotten out of bed or left the room during the night. Theo asks his wife directly if she likes this house, only to find out that Susanna doesn't like it either. Since Theo feels the same, the couple decides to leave the house immediately. While packing, Susanna tells Ella that she will be gone for 8 weeks for work and that Ella has to stay with Theo. Later, Theo is busy gathering his things when he notices Susanna and Ella playing together outside. Seeing this heartwarming scene from the window, Theo decides to send a message to his wife. However, he notices Susanna's phone on the table while she holds another phone in her hand. Theo immediately realizes that his wife is being unfaithful to him. Opening his diary, Theo sees the same note again, confirming that the nightmare was in fact real. But this time, another page is written with a new message warning him that they should have left. But now it's too late. Outside, he asks his daughter to go inside and then confronts his wife about a second phone. She admits she has a lover named Max, whom she met while filming in Mexico. Theo asks if Max is nearby, pointing out that someone wrote in his journal. She dismisses that thought, saying he is in New York. They both get into an argument, and Theo calmly asks her to leave until morning, but without taking Ella. Susanna doesn't want to separate from their daughter, but Theo insists. He needs time alone without his wife to think about their future. As she drives away, Susanna cries in the car, blaming herself for ruining their family. Ella tells her father she doesn't like the place and has constant nightmares. Theo assures her they will leave the next day as soon as her mother returns with the car. Then Theo notices that spilled water on the floor is acting strangely, defying the laws of physics. Theo and Ella repeat the experiment and find what they see disturbing. Remembering the ruler, Theo tests the right angles. He measures an angle that isn't straight, even though the wall looks perfectly perpendicular to the floor. They grab a measuring tape and run outside to measure the width of the house and realize the inside is 5 feet longer than the outside. Theo can't understand how this is possible. Ella feels cold and goes inside to get her jacket, and on her way out, Theo watches her go through a door, but she never comes out into the corridor. Concerned, Theo goes into the house to search for her. He finds Ella's jacket near the door, but not her. Initially, Theo thinks Ella might be joking, but it soon becomes clear that something is wrong. Meanwhile, Ella finds herself in that dark corridor again, calling out for her father. Theo goes through one of the doors and ends up in the kitchen, which shouldn't be possible because the kitchen is supposed to be in another part of the house. To avoid getting completely lost, Theo leaves a chair by one of the doors. Suddenly, he sees a long corridor stretching ahead of him. Meanwhile, Ella keeps calling for her father. When one of the doors opens, Ella goes inside. Theo is struggling to navigate the layout of this place. Eventually, he comes across the exact door from his nightmare. As he enters the dark corridor, Ella finds herself in a different house and encounters a woman in a bathtub. Startled, Ella screams and tries to run, only to bump into a man who must be Stettler. Meanwhile, Theo, hearing Ella scream, frantically searches for her. Theo and Ella search for each other in this never-ending, confusing corridor. When Theo hears his daughter's voice nearby, he breaks through a door and the dark corridor vanishes, allowing him to finally locate Ella. Theo tries calling Susanna, but her phone is off. So he calls the cashier from the local shop instead. He asks about getting a taxi, but the cashier says none are available. The cashier also mentions a strange thing about the house. The angles never meet properly here. He adds that there used to be a different house in this spot, and before that, a tower with bizarre stories linked to it. Theo is shocked to see photos of various people appearing on the wall. Suddenly, instead of the cashier, he hears a man's voice saying, "I'm always here." That night, Theo plans to leave with his daughter without taking any belongings. In a state of panic, they struggle to open the door. As they walk toward the village, Ella looks back and whispers to Theo, "There is somebody in our house." Sure enough, Theo turns and sees a shadow in a window watching them. He picks up Ella and begins walking faster down the road. The night is dark and cold, and they must pass through a creepy part where they hear weird sounds that frighten Ella. Theo tries to calm her by telling her it's just the sounds of animals in the area. Just then, they see lights ahead of them, and Theo is shocked to realize they are back at the same house. Ella is confused because they thought they were moving forward. Despite the cold, she refuses to go into the scary house. Theo insists they have no other option, or they will freeze. He assures his daughter he will keep her safe and promises that her mother will come for them the next day. Before bedtime, Ella questions her father about his love for her mother. Theo assures her he still loves Susanna, but acknowledges the challenges of adult life. He reflects on how everything, like money and success, once came easily to him, but he didn't consider himself admirable. However, Ella's presence changed his perspective, teaching him the essence of living. Eventually, both Ella and Theo fall asleep. Suddenly, a flash of light startles Theo awake. As he wakes up, he hears the sound of water being poured into the bathtub. Hurrying to check, he finds it empty. The door shuts by itself, separating him from his daughter once more. Theo finds himself reliving his past nightmare, facing a bathtub overflowing with water in the middle of the room. Suddenly, a woman jumps and grabs Theo from behind, throwing him to the ground. As he struggles to get her off of him, she vomits water on his face, and before Theo can open his eyes, she vanishes. It was Theo's mind playing tricks on him, making him hallucinate. Theo gets up and continues searching for a way out to find his daughter. Desperate to find his daughter, he barges through another door and comes face to face with himself. In a panic, Theo hastily writes a note in his diary, urging himself to leave at once. Theo feels like he is reliving the past, with one memory replacing another. He tries to escape, but the staircase seems to stretch endlessly in front of him. In this house, the normal rules of physics don't seem to apply. Despite these challenges, Theo manages to reach the second floor. He keeps calling out for his daughter and catches a glimpse of Susanna through a window. Suddenly, he finds himself back in that eerie room. Stettler stands before him, claiming to have many identities. Theo demands that Stettler let Ella go, insisting she has done nothing wrong. Stettler counters that children must suffer for their father's mistakes. Theo attacks Stettler, striking him with his cane and demanding she is innocent, but his blows have no effect. Suddenly, Stettler takes on Theo's appearance and claims that Theo himself is holding Ella captive. To free her, Theo has to let go. Ella finds her father, who hugs her and apologizes for lying. Ella still loves her father deeply, and it doesn't matter to her what he did in the past. Theo takes her in his arms and walks her out of the house. Meanwhile, Susanna is waiting, trying to hold back tears. Theo quietly walks past Susanna and puts Ella in the backseat of the car. Theo looks at Ella one last time, knowing it is their final goodbye. Susanna tearfully begs Theo to join them, hoping they can be a family again. After years of silence, Theo finally confesses to his wife that he was responsible for Caroline's death. He could have saved her, but he chose not to because she had made his life miserable. He watched her drown in the bathtub. Suzanne is shocked and doesn't know how to process this information. Theo now feels like he belongs in the house. The movie concludes as Theo watches Susanna and their daughter leave through the window. He realizes he was the silhouette they saw before. People always stay in this house, but some just never leave. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe for more videos.